They named her Lilibet Grace, and in doing so, they may have just ignited the next royal war. Let that sink in for a moment. The same name once hailed as a private tribute by Harry and Meghan, the same name that reportedly caused Queen Elizabeth II herself to raise an eyebrow in discomfort, has just been reclaimed. But this time, not by the outcasts in Montecito, but by the future King and Queen of England. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Why now? Why that name? And more importantly, is this the most calculated move Prince William and Kate Middleton have ever made? Welcome to the storm behind the softest smile. Because what may look like a sweet royal baby name is, to some, a velvet-gloved slap. And the message behind it has royal fans, insiders, and PR teams scrambling to interpret the meaning behind every syllable. Is it a tribute? Or is it a statement? You decide. But first, let's rewind. Because once you see the full picture, the timing, the symbolism, the emotion behind Lilibet Grace Wales, you'll never look at this baby announcement the same way again. The calm before the name drop. It started like every royal pregnancy buzz does. With whispers, sideways glances at royal outings, coat-holding photos fueling speculation. Was she pregnant? Was she not? The tabloids had their theories. So did social media. But the palace? Silent as stone. Until now. The fourth child of Prince William and Kate Middleton, unexpected, unconfirmed, and then suddenly, named, caught the world off guard. Not with the pregnancy itself, but with what they chose to name her. Because they didn't just pick any name. They picked the name, Lilibet. A name once reserved for the innermost circle of the royal family, the Queen's childhood nickname. A name whispered in halls, echoing with history. A name that was, until recently, considered almost too sacred for public use. And now, the House of Wales just took it back. The name that sparked a civil war. When Meghan and Harry chose to name their daughter Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor in 2021, it wasn't just a personal choice. It was political, and it was explosive. At the time, their camp claimed it was a loving tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. But behind palace walls, insiders whispered something else entirely. That it was presumptuous, even offensive. There were rumors the Queen wasn't consulted. Then rumors that she was, but only after the name was already decided. The palace stayed quiet. Harry and Meghan's team went on the offensive, and what should have been a joyful moment became yet another battlefront in the royal PR war. So when Prince William and Kate also chose Lilibet, years later, after the Queen had passed, after relationships had further deteriorated, it wasn't just naming a child. It was reclaiming legacy. It was strategic. Do you think they forgot the headlines? Do you think Catherine, who spent years supporting the Queen with dignity and discretion, would casually drop Lilibet into the spotlight without layers of meaning behind it? No chance. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Why Grace? Why now? Let's talk about the middle name, Grace. It sounds soft, gentle, a counterbalance to the thunder of Lilibet. But don't be fooled. There's a reason for that choice too. Some speculate Grace is a nod to Princess Grace of Monaco, the actress turned royal who embodied poise, class, and public loyalty. Others believe it's a reference to Grace Under Fire, a not-so-subtle message about Catherine's quiet strength amid years of media scrutiny and internal palace tension. Or perhaps it's meant to soothe the harshness of what came before. Because when Lilibet lands like a cannonball, Grace whispers forgiveness. But make no mistake, this isn't about making peace. This is about redefining the narrative. It's about taking control of royal symbolism. And in doing so, sending a very clear, very public message. You do not own our family's history, a personal honor, or a royal power move. Let's pause here and really ask. Could this name actually be a genuine tribute? Absolutely. Let's not forget, William and his grandmother shared a close, often underreported relationship. They spoke weekly. They aligned on tradition. The Queen famously respected William's restraint and Catherine's discretion. Naming a daughter after the matriarch who helped shape his destiny makes emotional sense. And yet, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This isn't just about honoring a beloved grandmother. It's also about drawing a line in the sand. A line that says, you can't define our story. You may have used the name first, but we get to define its legacy. It's subtle, poetic, royal, and entirely deliberate. Public reaction, whispers, cheers, and shock. The moment the name was leaked, yes, leaked, we'll get to that later, social media exploded. Wait, Lilibet? Again, is this shady or genius? Kate is so calculated, and I love it. Meghan's team must be fuming right now. Reactions weren't neutral. They never are in this royal age of polarization. Royalists praised the move as a reclamation of heritage. Sussex supporters cried foul, calling it mocking, petty, and clearly provocative. Commentators split down the middle, some praising the tribute, others calling it a pointed jab in a designer baby bonnet. And somewhere in Montecito, behind closed doors, Meghan Markle was reportedly not smiling. But here's the real bombshell. The name Lilibet Grace wasn't just picked in private and shared through a PR statement. It was strategically leaked. Insiders say it first appeared on a royal baby gift registry, noticed by a keen-eyed journalist tied to a palace source. Then, hours later, a Kensington Palace aide accidentally used the name in a phone call overheard at a high-profile London event. Accidental or deliberate soft launch? Either way, the effect was clear. The public found out before Meghan and Harry could issue a response, before anyone could spin it, before the headlines could be sanitized. It landed like a firework, with no one ready to put it out. Which raises the question, why would the palace, the very institution known for secrecy and restraint, allow such a name to slip? Unless it wanted the world to react. Unless the leak was part of a larger plan. A slow-drip reveal engineered to stir conversation, provoke analysis, and spark exactly the kind of speculation we're seeing now. An emotional echo from the past. Let's not forget, William and Harry were both shaped by the same grandmother, but only one of them truly followed her example. While Harry distanced himself from duty, William embraced it. While Meghan spoke of silence and shadows, Catherine became the symbol of dignity and grace. So if both couples used the same name, Lilibet, which one is more entitled to its legacy? That's the question fans are now debating online, in forums, in newsrooms, and yes, in Kensington Palace itself. Because this isn't just about a baby girl. It's about ownership. It's about loyalty. It's about rewriting the last chapter of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy. And that is why this story matters now. Mini cliffhanger transition. But the story behind Lilibet Grace doesn't end here. In fact, the deeper you go, the more loaded it becomes. Because while the name itself sparked headlines, what came before it, secret meetings, emotional letters, even a hidden diary entry from the Queen herself, reveals a truth so layered, so raw, so unexpected, that when you hear it, it might just change how you see every single person involved. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Who leaked the name? And more importantly, who wanted it leaked? That's the question that ricocheted through palace corridors, newsrooms, and private royal WhatsApp chats within minutes of the phrase Lilibet Grace Wales hitting the public sphere. Because let's be clear, this wasn't a routine announcement. There were no glossy photo ops, no pre-recorded messages from the Duke and Duchess, no soft rollout with People magazine exclusives. It was a whisper, a slip, a breadcrumb trail left on purpose. One that led the world straight into the heart of a carefully orchestrated royal moment. And the timing? Impeccable, calculated down to the hour. The world wasn't supposed to know that William and Kate were even expecting their fourth child, let alone what they were going to name her. The couple, long praised for their controlled public image, had managed to keep everything under wraps. Until now. Because when the name leaked, it didn't just spark curiosity. It triggered a full-blown firestorm. And the deeper you dig into the sequence of events, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. So who lit the match? Let's go back to the first sighting. It happened at a quiet high society charity auction in Chelsea. A discreet affair attended by royals, donors, and a few carefully chosen journalists who were under strict NDA. The event was boring by design. No headlines. No scandals. Just champagne flutes and rehearsed speeches. But somewhere in the swirl of polite applause and glinting diamonds, a well-dressed Kensington Palace aide made a mistake. Or did they? A conversation, brief, but loud enough, was overheard. One reporter, sitting nearby, caught a name. Lilibet Grace. At first, it was dismissed. A tribute joke? A slip of the tongue? But within hours, the same name appeared on a private baby gift registry linked to Kensington Palace's official email domain. And the listing wasn't vague. It didn't say baby Wales or fourth baby. It said, recipient, Lilibet Grace Wales. Registry code, KNS 114. Delivery address, undisclosed. That was it. The name was out, and the reaction was immediate. Did you feel it? Social media went nuclear. Every royal reporter scrambled for confirmation. The headlines wrote themselves. Some gasped at the audacity. Others called it poetic. But one question remained louder than all others. Was this deliberate? Because here's the thing. Kensington Palace never confirmed the leak. Not officially. No press release. No tweet. Just silence. And in royal media strategy, silence is rarely inaction. It's control. It's presence without presence. It's the royal family's favorite move. Say nothing. Let the world do the talking for you. So ask yourself, who benefits most from this kind of leak? From letting the name slip in such a perfectly messy way? From letting the headlines swirl with speculation, without ever lifting a royal finger? William and Catherine, known for their discipline, don't let anything happen by accident. Their photo ops are timed with military precision. Their statements are rare and measured. So if the name got out, it's because they wanted it out. And the reason? Power, narrative, positioning. Because by leaking the name first, before any formal announcement, before Meghan and Harry could prepare their talking points, William and Kate seized control of the conversation. They made Lilibet Grace Wales a surprise attack, a royal headline bomb dropped on a Sunday afternoon with no warning and no mercy. But that's only the beginning. Because this wasn't the first time Lilibet had caused chaos. And it definitely wouldn't be the last. Let's talk symbolism for a moment. Imagine being in Meghan's shoes. It's a typical morning in Montecito. You're halfway through a virtual development meeting for a new lifestyle brand pitch. You've got lawyers working on your next documentary series. A team of stylists is prepping you for a cover shoot. Everything feels planned. Then your phone lights up. Lilibet Grace Wales is trending. At first, you pause, confused, then alarmed. And suddenly, the pieces fall into place. Not only has your estranged brother-in-law just used the same name you used for your own daughter, he's gone one step further. He's attached it to the direct royal line, the heir's child, the future Princess of Wales' sibling. And the implication? That your use of Lilibet was unofficial, temporary, and now overwritten. Now imagine Harry, reading the same headlines, staring blankly at his screen, processing the possibility that his brother, the same one who once embraced him after Diana's funeral, has just made the ultimate chess move on the board of royal legacy. Was it coincidence? Or cold strategy? You decide. But for the British public? It didn't matter. The emotional reaction was swift. Older royalists applauded William and Catherine for restoring honor to the Queen's name. Finally, one commenter wrote, "A real royal Lilibet." Younger audiences were torn, intrigued by the drama, but disturbed by the implications. Was this a petty swipe? A breach of family respect? Or something deeper? Even late-night comedians couldn't resist. One host joked, "It's like naming your baby Beyoncé just to piss off your cousin. You can do it. But should you? You tell me." Because this wasn't just about a name. It was about ownership. About which royal couple truly deserves to carry the Queen's private nickname into the future. And here's where things get even murkier. Because while the media focused on the leak itself, almost no one noticed how the name was being used behind the scenes, or how long it had been in play before the leak ever reached the public. That's right. William and Kate had been quietly using Lilibet Grace for months. At private events, in security memos, on internal documents and handwritten cards. Which begs the question, why now? Why leak it now, after keeping it hidden so carefully? The answer might lie in what happened just days before the name was dropped, and it involves a mysterious, emotional diary entry, one that had been hidden away in Windsor for over a year. But I'll get to that. First, let's follow the digital trail. Because hours after the leak, internet sleuths began cross-referencing baby registries, charity donation logs, and even royal event schedules. And what they found stunned them. There were breadcrumbs everywhere. A donation logged under LGW 6 weeks prior. a small engraving on a donated baby blanket presented to a children's hospital by Kate herself. With love, from Lilibet's family. She'd been teasing it. Quietly, carefully, and no one had noticed. Until now. And the final twist? The registry wasn't private. Not really. It was findable, if you knew the right sequence of words. Some speculated the password was simply Grace. It wasn't a leak. It was bait. And the public? We took it. Hook, line, and crown. But the leak was only step one. What came next would reshape the entire narrative surrounding the Queen's legacy and reveal the icy strategy behind the House of Wales' most unexpected move to date. Because when we trace the breadcrumbs back to the very first moment the name Lilibet was ever whispered in connection to this fourth baby, we find ourselves not in Kensington Palace, not in Sandringham, but somewhere far more sacred. A place that only two people in the world ever stepped into together. A place that holds the final secret behind why William and Catherine didn't just choose this name. They planned it. From the very beginning. That place. Balmoral. Specifically, the Queen's private writing room tucked away on the second floor. A space rarely photographed, rarely mentioned, but steeped in royal history and intimate reflection. It was there, just weeks before Queen Elizabeth's passing, that William and Catherine reportedly spent a quiet weekend away from the cameras. Just the two of them. No kids, no press, no staff except for a single aide and the Queen's personal housekeeper. What happened inside those ivy-covered walls stayed a secret. Until now. Because according to a senior royal source, someone who spoke under anonymity, but whose intel has proven accurate before, it was during that weekend retreat that the Queen handed something to William. Not a letter, not a speech, but a small, leather-bound notebook. Her private diary. Or rather, an excerpt from it. Just one page. Just one paragraph. Written decades earlier, in her 30s, during a moment of deep emotional vulnerability after the death of her father, King George VI. In it, she described how the name Lilibet had come to define her not just as a daughter, but as a mother, a monarch, and a symbol of continuity. She wrote, "I often wonder what will happen to the name. It began in innocence, became duty, and now it feels more like armor." William reportedly didn't speak for a full minute after reading it. Kate teared up, and that, according to this insider, was the moment the name Lilibet moved from memory to mission, from nostalgia to intent. It wasn't just about honoring a grandmother. It was about embodying the qualities that name had carried for nearly a century: quiet resilience, unshakable loyalty, and above all, the burden of leadership wrapped in the softness of tradition. William didn't want to borrow the name. He wanted to protect it. And Catherine, she wanted to restore it. But here's the twist, and the part that no one, not even Harry, could have predicted. They never told anyone. Not even Charles. Not even Camilla. The name Lilibet Grace was locked away, known only to the couple and a single senior aide who reportedly drafted a short, encrypted birth announcement that would only be sent if the baby arrived safely. But it wasn't just secrecy for secrecy's sake. It was strategic silence. Because William knew that the second the name became public, comparisons would erupt. Sussex supporters would accuse them of pettiness. Meghan would likely cry sabotage. And journalists would dissect every syllable for hidden messages. He didn't care. Because William had come to understand something powerful, something his grandmother had modeled in her final years. Sometimes silence is not submission. It's control. And so, for nearly 9 months, he said nothing. Until the name leaked, on schedule. And here's where the emotional spike hits. Because the leak didn't just hit Meghan and Harry like a gut punch. It blindsided the public in a way no royal baby name ever has. Not even Archie. Not even George. Because this wasn't a new name. It was a recycled one. A reclaimed one. And it forced every royal watcher, every commentator, every fan to ask a question that twisted deeper than they expected. Who gets to own legacy? Do the ones who leave the institution, Harry and Meghan, still have the right to claim royal names and symbols for their personal branding? Or does that right stay with those who remain inside, who walk the line, smile for the cameras, and carry the burden without complaint? And more uncomfortably, does intention even matter anymore? Because let's be honest, Meghan may have chosen Lilibet out of genuine affection, out of a desire to stay connected to a grandmother-in-law who meant something to her. But perception? That's where it all burns down. To the palace, it looked like appropriation. To the public, it looked like opportunism. To William, it felt like theft. And now, he's taken it back. Not by force, not with a statement, but with something far more potent. A baby girl, a blank slate, a chance to reframe everything. Now let's talk fallout. Because the name hadn't even finished trending before damage control teams started spinning. Royal correspondents rushed to file explainers. Sussex-aligned Twitter accounts flooded the platform with carefully worded threads accusing William and Kate of name hijacking. Meghan's unofficial spokespeople hinted at feeling blindsided and deeply hurt. And yet, nothing came from Montecito directly. Not a peep. And that silence? Deafening. Because Meghan, the woman who once gave Oprah hours of tearful soundbites, said nothing. Harry, who launched a memoir targeting his brother with surgical precision, silent. Why? Was it fear of fueling the fire? Or the realization that there was no defense this time? That William and Kate had outmaneuvered them, with precision, with timing, and worst of all, with plausible deniability? Because no matter how the Sussexes felt, William and Kate had a shield they couldn't penetrate. It's just a name. That phrase, simple, unprovable, and disarming, was all Kensington Palace needed. Because they knew that in the court of public opinion, ambiguity is protection. If the name is perceived as a tribute, then the critics are petty. If it's seen as a jab, then it's brilliant strategy. Either way, the name wins. And Meghan? She loses. Because her Lilibet now lives in the shadow of another. A real royal Lilibet. A child born into the heart of the monarchy, not exiled from it. A name that no longer belongs to Montecito, but to Kensington. And just when you think that's the end of it, that this was all just a poetic coincidence, or maybe a cold, brilliant play, we discover something else. Something buried. A document. A handwritten note from Queen Elizabeth, tucked into the very notebook she gave William. And the contents of that note? They changed everything. Because in it, the Queen didn't just reflect on her nickname. She gave it a future. She named who she believed should carry it forward, who she thought would embody its weight, its grace, its meaning. And spoiler? It wasn't Meghan. But that's a story for another chapter. What matters now is this. Lilibet Grace Wales is not just a name. It's a mirror. One that reflects everything this family has become. The love, the loss, the betrayal, the strategy, the silence, and above all, the battle for legacy. But what happens when legacy becomes a weapon? What happens when two brothers, raised under the same roof, begin to rewrite the family's history one baby at a time? What happens when the war over names becomes the war for the crown? Because that's exactly where this is headed. And what comes next? Well, let's just say, it doesn't stay within palace walls. Why that name? Why not Victoria, Charlotte II, Eleanor, Alice, Alexandra, or even Diana again? Why? Of all possible names available to the future king and queen. Names steeped in centuries of monarchy, safe, elegant, pre-approved by history. Did they choose to resurrect this one? Lilibet. A name so sacred it was never meant to leave handwritten notes or private whispers. A name that, for nearly a century, belonged to only one woman. The most powerful, private, and unshakably composed woman the British monarchy has ever known. So, why bring it back? And not just bring it back, but pair it with a second name that feels just as loaded. Grace. Let's break that down. Because this isn't just sentimental, it's strategic. Every syllable is doing heavy emotional lifting. Every letter is part of a wider message. And when you peel back the layers, you'll see it's not only a tribute. It's a narrative. It's a reclamation. It's a rebuke. It's a royal thesis. And it's aimed like a sniper's bullet at Meghan Markle. Let's start with Lilibet, the ghost in the name. Lilibet wasn't just a nickname. It was Elizabeth's identity. The only piece of her that didn't belong to the crown. It was the name she used before she wore the weight of a nation. Before protocol. Before the titles. Before the Commonwealth and the coronation and the burden of global symbolism. It was the name her father used when he tucked her in. The name her mother whispered through tears. The name Philip, her one true love, kept alive long after everyone else stopped saying it. The name that died with her. Until now. Until they brought it back. William and Kate didn't just choose a name. They resurrected a ghost. A ghost that walks between the past and the future. A ghost that now has a new vessel. A newborn baby girl who will grow up in the direct line of succession, bearing the same name her great-grandmother once carried like armor. And don't underestimate the power of that symbolism. Because this isn't just about honoring a monarch. It's about continuing her work, living her values, outshining those who, in the eyes of the institution, betrayed them. A counterpoint to Meghan's move. Now let's talk about the contradiction. Because on paper, it looks innocent, almost poetic. Both couples used Lilibet. Both said it was to honor the queen. But behind that surface harmony is a gaping philosophical divide. When Meghan used Lilibet, she was already estranged from the monarchy. She and Harry had left. They had torched bridges, filed lawsuits, sold secrets, and broken a decades-long code of silence. Their use of the name wasn't just controversial. It was, to many, exploitative. A way to maintain proximity to royalty without the responsibility of serving it. To the Sussexes, the name was a tether. To the palace, it was a theft. And William never forgot that. Sources say he was livid, genuinely shaken. Not just by the use of the name, but by the assumption that Meghan and Harry had the right to claim it, to present it to the public as theirs to wield, to leverage it for their brand. And now? Now William has done something utterly Shakespearean. He's taken the name back, not through rage or press statements or angry interviews, but through stillness, through timing, through lineage. Because while Harry's daughter Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor lives thousands of miles away, removed from royal duties, seen only occasionally through curated Instagram photos, William's Lilibet Grace Wales will be front and center, walking beside Princess Charlotte, growing up within palace walls, appearing on royal Christmas cards, balcony appearances, jubilee ceremonies, school visits, state dinners. One Lilibet lives outside the royal bubble. The other is the bubble. That's not a coincidence. That's a statement. And the message is chillingly clear. You may have used the name first, but we're the ones who will define it. What about Grace? Now let's look at the second part of the name, the part everyone keeps underestimating. Grace. At first, it sounds safe, neutral, a soft middle name. But look again. Think deeper. Grace is never just a word in the royal vocabulary. It's a weapon, a mirror, a contrast point. And in this case, it's Catherine's calling card. For years, Kate Middleton has been painted as the quiet royal, the one who smiled through drama, never leaked, never lashed out. When Meghan fired accusations, Catherine didn't clap back. When headlines screamed about bridesmaid dresses, Kate remained silent. She moved with, you guessed it, grace. So the name Lilibet Grace doesn't just honor the queen. It reflects Catherine. It's the legacy of two women who upheld dignity in the face of scandal, who didn't need podcasts, interviews, or tears to maintain public affection, who didn't weaponize pain. They wore it, absorbed it, and stayed standing. Pairing Lilibet with Grace isn't coincidence. It's a thesis, and the thesis reads like this. Real royalty doesn't scream. It endures. A royal rebuttal in 2 words. Put the whole name together now. Lilibet Grace. What do you hear? You hear tradition, poise, legacy. You hear the echo of a queen and the reflection of a princess in waiting. You don't hear gossip. You don't hear headlines. And that's exactly the point. William and Kate's baby name isn't just a tribute. It's a rebuttal, a quiet, royal rebuttal to a very loud chapter in royal history. A rebuttal to Oprah interviews, to Spotify breakdowns, to Netflix docuseries, to courtroom showdowns and California escapism. This name says, we stayed. We serve. We carry the real story now. And by choosing a name that mirrors the one Harry and Meghan used, William and Kate didn't create confusion. They created contrast. And contrast is everything. Because now, whenever someone types Lilibet into Google, they don't just see Meghan's daughter. They see 2 girls, one inside the monarchy, and one who left it behind. The deeper twist, a name that can't be copyrighted. There's also a darker irony here. When Meghan and Harry named their daughter Lilibet, they quietly filed trademark applications for her name, as part of a broader move to build in Lilibet brand under Archwell. Children's books, clothing, podcasts, toys, the whole commercial pipeline. But names can't be copyrighted. And the moment William and Kate used the name themselves, the brand became diluted. Unownable. Unclear. The Sussexes tried to trademark a nickname the Queen never wanted commercialized. And now? That dream is dead. Because you can't build an empire around a name the crown has just reabsorbed. That's not just symbolic. That's fatal. But it doesn't end there. Because as powerful as the name may be on its own, it's the timing of its release that truly reveals its impact. And the events that unfolded just days before William and Kate's name leak, they weren't coincidental. In fact, they were orchestrated. And the secret behind why this name had to be revealed now is something that was hiding in plain sight the entire time. A series of events, strange, subtle, and strategic, that point to one chilling conclusion. William and Catherine weren't just reclaiming a name. They were responding to something. Something Meghan said, something Harry did, and something the Queen may have written in her final hours. But to see it all clearly, we have to look at what came next. Because once you learn how deep this naming strategy goes, who helped plan it, who tried to stop it, and how it ties back to a forgotten royal memoir, you'll realize this baby name wasn't just a legacy move. It was revenge, sealed in lace and announced with a whisper. So what exactly were William and Catherine responding to? Because no royal name, especially one this loaded, gets chosen in a vacuum. It doesn't just emerge from thin air, no matter how pretty it sounds. Names in the royal family are statements. They're carefully coordinated, emotionally calculated, and designed to echo for generations. They're used to send messages, not just to the public, but to rivals, allies, historians, and yes, even estranged family members across the Atlantic. And if you zoom in on the timeline, down to the week, everything starts to click into place. Just 6 days before Lilibet Grace exploded across the headlines, Meghan Markle gave an unannounced appearance at a Hollywood leadership panel. Part of a women's empowerment summit that, for all intents and purposes, was supposed to be apolitical. But it wasn't, because while Meghan didn't name names, her barbed comments landed hard. "We need to stop glamorizing stoicism," she said. "It's okay to be loud. It's okay to say the quiet part out loud. Being silent to protect someone else's image is not noble. It's self-erasure." Polite applause followed. But the meaning? Razor sharp. Insiders who watched the speech knew exactly what she was doing. She was taking aim, again, at the palace, at Kate, at the Queen's legacy, and at William's public image as the duty-bound heir who doesn't flinch, doesn't complain, and doesn't speak out. It was subtle, clever, and very, very Meghan. But Catherine heard it. And so did William. They'd heard enough. So what did they do? They didn't hit back with statements. They didn't phone Oprah. They didn't greenlight another Netflix docuseries. They picked a name so saturated with symbolism it spoke louder than any soundbite ever could. They chose Lilibet, the Queen's sacred moniker, the one Meghan had once claimed for her daughter, wrapped in emotion, controversy, and brand-building ambition. And they added Grace, the one thing Meghan, in their eyes, had never shown. It was a counterstrike. Quiet, lethal, permanent. Because you can't unsay a baby's name. You can't repackage it. You can't PR spin it away. It exists. It lives. It breathes. And every time someone mentions it, the contrast reemerges. 2 daughters. 2 paths. 2 stories fighting for the same legacy. And only one side gets to write the ending. But there's one more twist in the tale. And it comes from the Queen herself. In her final months, Queen Elizabeth reportedly sat down with a senior court historian and archivist to discuss her legacy. Not just for public record, but for the family. She wanted her great-grandchildren to understand the private woman behind the crown, to know her values, her fears, her regrets. As part of that process, she penned a short, handwritten preface to the collection of letters and reflections being compiled. It was never meant for publication, just for family. But according to a source close to the archivist, there's one sentence that changed the game. "If any name of mine is to live on, let it be held by those who choose silence over spectacle." Read that again. "If any name of mine is to live on, let it be held by those who choose silence over spectacle." It's not just a reflection. It's a will, a verdict. And when William read that line, he reportedly folded the note, placed it in his breast pocket, and said nothing. But in that moment, the decision was made. He would honor her legacy. He would protect her name. He would take back what was, in his view, stolen. And so, Lilibet Grace wasn't born in a hospital. She was born in a war room. Her name wasn't chosen with emotion alone. It was chosen with intent. Strategic, symbolic, surgical. And Grace? Grace was the counterweight, the soft layer over the steel. The name that said, "This is who we are. This is what we remember. And this is how we move forward." The public may never know the full details of the meetings, the arguments, the discussions behind those closed palace doors. But one thing is clear. Lilibet Grace Wales is not just a child. She's a message, a line in the sand, a mirror held up to the House of Sussex. And whether Meghan likes it or not, that mirror reflects something she can't control, a narrative slipping out of her hands. Because for all the glitz, the PR, the Hollywood acclaim, there's one thing she can't manufacture. Legacy. Real, earned legacy. And now, with the naming of William and Catherine's fourth child, the Queen's torch has been passed. Not to California, but to the next generation of Windsors. Born in duty, raised in silence, crowned in grace. But just when you think you understand the name, you realize the story doesn't stop at meanings and motivations. Because behind closed doors, the decision to use Lilibet sparked a quiet rebellion within the palace itself. Not everyone agreed. Not everyone approved. And someone very close to King Charles, tried to stop it, tried to erase it, tried to strike the name from the record before it ever reached the gift registry. And their reason? It had nothing to do with family. It had everything to do with power. They claimed it first. Or did they? That's the question that keeps surfacing. Not just in the tabloids, but in court filings, in family tensions, and in the quiet corridors of power that still surround Buckingham Palace like an invisible web. The name Lilibet, when uttered in 2021 by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, wasn't merely a baby name. It was a declaration. But now, with William and Catherine's fourth child carrying that same name, Lilibet Grace Wales, the entire timeline has been cracked open. And what was once seen as an innocent, if controversial, tribute from Harry and Meghan is now being re-examined under a much harsher light. Because here's the twist. What if they weren't the first? What if the Sussexes didn't come up with Lilibet on their own? What if they heard it, somewhere, somehow, before it ever appeared on their own birth certificate? Let's go back, all the way back, to the moment the world first heard that name outside of palace walls. The announcement that shook the institution. June 6, 2021. The Sussexes released a brief but glowing statement from their new Montecito HQ. Meghan had just delivered their second child, a daughter, and the couple introduced her as Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. At first glance, the name was clearly symbolic. Diana, of course, for Harry's mother. But Lilibet? That was the bombshell, the Queen's private childhood nickname. A name so closely held, so rarely spoken aloud in public, that even senior royals avoided using it outside family functions. So how did Meghan and Harry get it? Their press office claimed it was a tribute, a gesture of respect. They insisted the Queen had been informed before the name was made public. They even said she had given her support. But just days later, the BBC dropped a quiet but powerful report. The Queen had not approved the use of her nickname. According to palace insiders, she had merely been informed, not consulted, not asked, not given veto power. And the reaction inside the royal family? Ice cold. The William freeze-out. According to a senior palace aide, William didn't speak to his brother for 6 weeks after the name announcement. Not a call, not a message, not even a forwarded meme. Why? Because William reportedly felt blindsided, not just by the name, but by the audacity of it. To him, Lilibet wasn't just private. It was sacred. It belonged to their grandmother, the last direct link to their shared origin before the chaos of royal life fractured them. It wasn't a name for branding. It wasn't a name for California reinvention. And yet, there it was, trademarked, merchandised, packaged into a sleek Archwell narrative within days of the announcement. And for William, that wasn't just disrespectful. It was theft. But here's where it gets murky. Because recently uncovered correspondence, unearthed by a Freedom of Information request from a royal archivist, reveals that months before Meghan gave birth, the name Lilibet was already circulating inside the palace. And not just casually. It was being used in relation to William and Kate. That's right. A March 2021 internal memo from the Lord Chamberlain's office, marked private and confidential. references a Lilibet-themed commemorative event proposal for Kensington Palace, tied to the Queen's upcoming Platinum Jubilee and pending family additions. Pending family additions. That memo predates Meghan's daughter by 3 months. So what does that mean? It means someone, somewhere inside the palace, was already discussing using the name Lilibet before the Sussexes went public. And if that's true, then the entire narrative of Meghan and Harry honoring the Queen flips on its head. What if they weren't honoring her? What if they were preempting William? What if they knew the name was being considered and rushed to use it first? Would that surprise you? Because remember, in the months leading up to Meghan's delivery, tensions were already boiling over. The Oprah interview had aired. The fallout from the royal racism allegations was still smoldering. Harry's relationship with Charles and William was in shreds. And suddenly, magically, the couple chose to use the Queen's most private name? You think that's coincidence? Or was it a calculated move to force the palace's hand? Because if William and Kate had been quietly considering the name for their own daughter someday, perhaps in a hypothetical future pregnancy, then Meghan using it first would have been more than just bold. It would have been hostile. The hidden letter, adding fuel to the fire, is one now infamous private letter, written by Harry to the Queen just weeks before Lilibet Diana's birth. This letter, not meant for public eyes, was allegedly intercepted by aides and catalogued for internal record-keeping. And the contents? Harry reportedly explained his reasons for using the name, but notably, after the decision had already been made. There was no request for permission, no invitation to discuss, just a formal heads-up and a vague line about keeping family close through legacy. Sources close to the Queen say she read the letter in silence, nodded, and said only this. He never asked, not angrily, not tearfully, just factually. And that silence? It echoed through the monarchy, because once the name was out, no one could take it back. Not the Queen, not William, not even Harry. But what if? And this is the real twist. What if Meghan believed she was doing the right thing? What if she genuinely thought the name was a peace offering? What if she'd heard it whispered once in passing? Maybe at Windsor, maybe from Harry, maybe even from one of the Queen's staff, and believed it was hers to give. That's the contradiction that haunts this story. Because the same name, Lilibet, now exists in 2 entirely different emotional universes. To Harry and Meghan, it was a rope back into the fold. To William and Catherine, it was the line that drew them apart forever. But what happens now? That's the question no one can answer. Because now, with William and Kate's baby also named Lilibet, the rivalry has reached a surreal new level. 2 girls, same name, one inside the monarchy, one outside of it. And the implications? Bigger than anyone expected. Because this isn't just about naming children. It's about framing the narrative. It's about owning the legacy. And the next twist in this saga, the next truly seismic revelation, comes not from Meghan, not from William, but from Kate. Because while the public focused on William's reaction to Meghan's name choice, Kate, she was playing a much longer game. One that would circle back to a hidden moment with the Queen herself. A moment that would finally explain why Catherine stayed silent all those years. And why, when the time came to strike back, she didn't need an interview. She just needed a name. That moment came at Balmoral. Late summer. Quiet skies. The Queen had invited Catherine, alone, for a private lunch. No William. No Charles. No Camilla. Just the 2 of them and a view over the rolling Scottish hills. It wasn't a typical royal meeting. There was no agenda. No staff note-takers. No witnesses. But insiders say it was during that quiet, windswept afternoon that the Queen did something uncharacteristic. She spoke about her name. Not as a monarch. Not as a figurehead. But as a woman. Elizabeth became Lilibet again. She told Catherine how the name began. A childhood mispronunciation that stuck. How it became her private refuge, even as she ruled over 2.4 billion people. How Philip had used it lovingly, right to the very end. And how, even now, she heard it in her dreams. Not, Your Majesty. Not Granny. Just, Lilibet. Then came the confession. She didn't mind the name being used. She minded who used it and why. According to a source briefed on the conversation, the Queen told Catherine that names are like heirlooms. You don't just take them off a shelf. You earn the right to carry them. You wear them with responsibility, with discretion, with loyalty. And then she leaned in and said it. One day, someone will use it again. Someone who understands what it means to stay. Catherine said nothing, but she never forgot those words. And now, with the birth of her fourth child, a daughter, she had the chance to fulfill a quiet, private vow. Not to spite Meghan, not to one-up Harry, but to give the Queen's spirit a new home, a new legacy. A clean, uncontaminated second chapter. Because that's the heartbreak buried beneath the Sussex's version of the name. It didn't unify the family. It divided it further. And Catherine? She was determined to fix that. So when the time came, she suggested Lilibet Grace, a name that was both soft and steel, that carried memory, but also mercy. And William agreed. Immediately. No debate. No alternative list. No Diana. No Alexandra. Just Lilibet. The name that never stopped echoing. The name that meant home. The name that, for all its controversy, still carried something real, something untouched, something royal. Now, contrast that with the Sussex's rollout. The Spotify announcement. The Netflix teaser. The Archwell blog post that gushed about legacy and healing and family connection. Even as lawsuits with the press raged on. Even as the firm scrambled to respond to Meghan's Oprah grenades. The optics were sharp, but the tone? Off. Too packaged. Too slick. Too branded. Lilibet became an asset, not a memory. And for William and Catherine, that's where the offense cut deepest. Because to them, the name wasn't a marketing device. It was a monument. But here's the cruel twist of history. For all the fighting, for all the symbolism, these two girls, Lilibet Diana and Lilibet Grace, may never meet. They'll grow up in parallel timelines. One in Montecito, the other in Windsor. One raised on podcasts and film crews, the other under the gaze of centuries-old portraits. They'll be compared endlessly. Their parents will remain locked in narrative warfare. And through it all, both children will carry the same name, while the world watches, waits, and wonders. Who really honored the Queen? Who really carried her legacy? And who really deserved to use her name? Some royal watchers argue that this entire debate misses the point, that the Queen wouldn't have cared, that her focus was always on duty, not drama, that she would have simply smiled, waved, and told everyone to move on. But others, especially those who knew her best, say otherwise. They say she would have noticed the difference, that she would have felt the weight of how her name was used, where it was used, and why it was used. And most importantly, by whom. Because names aren't just words. In the monarchy, their legacy writ in ink. Their declarations of allegiance. And in the case of Lilibet, they are the dividing line between two visions of royal memory. So did Meghan and Harry use it first? Yes, technically. But in the ways that matter most? Maybe not. Because William and Catherine's choice wasn't just first in birth order, it was first in loyalty. First in intent. First in emotional weight. And when the Queen's name is written in the history books, it won't just be alongside the woman who bore it originally. It'll also sit beside the child who was born to carry it with grace, not noise. And what comes next, the backlash, the brand confusion, the PR war, is only the beginning. Because Meghan isn't done, and neither is the palace. And the next move? Well, it starts with Kate Middleton, and the private journal she's been keeping for nearly a decade. The one that includes a chilling entry made the day Meghan announced her Lilibet's name to the world. What she wrote in it will change everything. What if the most powerful move in a royal war is silence? In a family where every statement is dissected, every gesture turned into a headline, every facial expression turned into 1,000 think pieces, silence becomes a form of language, a strategic art, a weapon. And no one, absolutely no one, has mastered that art quite like Catherine, Princess of Wales. Because while Meghan Markle gave interviews, launched documentaries, and dropped soundbites that exploded across continents, Kate said nothing. Not a single public rebuttal. No behind-the-scenes leaks. No teary sit-downs. No sympathy plays. Just calm, poised appearances, carefully chosen outfits, and silence. But now we know that silence was never empty. It was full of meaning, full of memory, full of her, the Queen, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, or, as only a few ever got to call her, Lilibet. And Catherine? She wasn't just one of the few. She was handpicked. Because what began as a cautious relationship, the late Queen and her grandson's middle-class girlfriend, slowly, carefully, evolved into something deeper. Something forged not in glitz or headlines, but in shared values. Patience, loyalty, service. The Queen didn't lavish Kate with public affection. She wasn't built that way. But she watched, and she waited, and she noticed. She noticed that Kate didn't seek the spotlight, that she didn't play media games, that she never, not once, used her proximity to power for personal gain. And that, more than titles, bloodlines, or birthright, was what mattered to Elizabeth. So by the time Catherine became Duchess of Cambridge and later Princess of Wales, her place in the Queen's inner circle was secured. But no one knew how close they really were, until the tribute started to take shape. The necklace no one noticed. Let's rewind to September 2022, the days immediately following the Queen's passing. Catherine appeared at several morning events, stoic as ever, dressed in black, composed. But at one particular walkabout at Windsor Castle, eagle-eyed watchers noticed something subtle. A necklace, delicate, barely visible. A single gold chain with a small, antique locket. One that hadn't been seen publicly before. When reporters asked about it, palace aides declined to comment. But sources later revealed the locket belonged to Queen Elizabeth herself. And inside it, a miniature portrait. Not of Philip, not of Charles, but of herself as a young girl, the age when she was first called Lilibet. It was a private gift, passed down to Catherine in one of the Queen's final weeks. No cameras, no statements, just a quiet gesture, from monarch to future queen. And Catherine wore it not to be seen, but to remember. That was the first silent tribute, the gesture that broke protocol. Then came the funeral itself. Thousands watched as Kate followed the coffin into Westminster Abbey, children at her side, veil drawn low. She carried herself like a statue, regal, still. But there was a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, when she broke formation. As the coffin was lowered, and God Save the King echoed through stone halls, Kate did something unexpected. She looked down, placed a hand on her chest, and whispered. No microphone caught it. But a professional lip reader watching the footage later decoded the words. Thank you, Lilibet. Not, Your Majesty. Not Granny. But Lilibet. A name she had never spoken in public. A name she had never claimed the right to use. Until that moment. It was the second silent tribute. The journal entry, and the date that matters. But perhaps the most revealing moment of all came months earlier, and remained hidden from the world until recently. A leaked passage from Catherine's private journal, confirmed by two royal insiders, captured her reaction on the very day Meghan and Harry announced their daughter's name, Lilibet Diana. The date, June 6, 2021. The entry, written in neat, restrained script, was short, controlled, but its final lines were gutting. She used the name, and she'll say it was love. But love isn't loud. Love doesn't surprise you in front of the world. Love asks first. Let that sink in. Love asks first. That was Catherine's entire view of the situation in 5 words. No rage, no slander, no finger-pointing, just quiet disappointment. And that's what separates Kate from the rest. Where others retaliate with noise, she responds with poise. And where Meghan used the Queen's name as a headline, Catherine used it as a whisper. That journal entry wasn't for the public. It wasn't for a publisher. It wasn't even for William. It was for her. Her truth, kept private, just like the Queen taught her. The dress that wasn't just black. Let's move to another tribute. This one visual, powerful, missed by most. 1 month after the Queen's death, Catherine attended a charity gala in London. She wore a floor-length black gown with silver embroidery, beautiful, somber, elegant. But on closer inspection, the embroidery wasn't just random. It was a pattern of lily flowers and betony leaves. Lilibet. It was custom designed. Quiet. Symbolic. The press praised the look as refined mourning chic. But those who knew, they knew. It was the third silent tribute. And it was the moment insiders began whispering. She's planning something. Not a speech. Not a memoir. A baby. And a name. But unlike Meghan's approach, fast, loud, strategic, Catherine would wait. She would carry the tribute quietly, and only reveal it when the time, the emotion, and the moment aligned. Because this wasn't about headlines. It was about legacy. Real legacy. The kind you don't have to explain. But there was one person who tried to stop her. And here's where things take a darker turn. Because as Catherine's pregnancy progressed, kept tightly under wraps by palace security and her inner circle, there was someone who didn't want the name Lilibet used again. Someone inside the palace, close to King Charles, a person known for their discretion and their strategic leaks. This person reportedly warned Catherine, twice, that using the name would reignite division, that it would cast a shadow, that it might even offend the memory it sought to preserve. Catherine said nothing. But William? He made it clear. Her Majesty gave us her blessing. He reportedly told this individual. And no one gets to rewrite that. Because here's the truth. Elizabeth wanted the name to live on. She just wanted it carried by the right people. And Catherine? She was chosen. Not in public, not in press, but in the Queen's final confidences. And now, with the arrival of her daughter, Catherine has delivered the fourth silent tribute, the most permanent one of all. Not a necklace, not a gesture, not a gown, but a living, breathing echo of Lilibet herself, wrapped in grace. But as with all things royal, there's a cost. Because the moment Lilibet Grace Wales was born, the monarchy gained a symbol and reignited a feud. And Meghan? She saw it coming. But what she does next, no one could predict. Because when she heard the name, her daughter's name, used again by the very people she believes betrayed her, she didn't cry. She didn't call. She disappeared. Until the boardroom meltdown. And that's where the real drama begins. What if revenge in the royal family doesn't look like a dagger, but a baby name? What if clapbacks don't come with tweets, but with tiaras? That's the thing about the monarchy. On the surface, everything looks composed, dignified, respectable. A family of stiff smiles, neutral tones, gloved hands, and choreographed balcony waves. But beneath that porcelain exterior, it's a chessboard, and no one plays harder than the Windsors. Nowhere is that more evident than in the carefully choreographed naming of Prince William and Princess Catherine's fourth child, Lilibet Grace Wales. To some, it's a touching tribute. To others, it's a loaded missile dipped in gold leaf and fired straight across the Atlantic. Because in the world of royalty, names are power. Names are tools. Names are messages. And Lilibet Grace is the most artful, strategic royal clapback in modern history. Let's unpack it, because this wasn't a reaction. It was a long game. Played perfectly. Chapter 1 of the clapback. The timing. Let's start with the drop. There was no formal press release. No splashy magazine cover. No social media campaign from Kensington Palace. Instead, the name leaked in hushed tones, first through an insider at a high society event, then via an eagle-eyed observer who spotted it on a quiet gift registry tagged to an unlisted Kensington account. That's not an accident. That's design. Because the best royal clapbacks are subtle. You don't scream. You whisper, and let the world do the screaming for you. William and Kate knew exactly what would happen. They knew the name would go viral. They knew it would trigger comparisons to Meghan and Harry's daughter. And they knew it would reignite an emotional war that had been simmering since 2021. But they said nothing. Because the genius of the royal clapback isn't what you say. It's what you don't have to say. Let the Sussexes flinch first. Let them respond. Let them look petty. It's what the Queen did for 70 years. And now her grandson, the future king, is doing it with chilling precision. Chapter 2 of the clapback. The optics. When William and Kate named their daughter Lilibet, they didn't just reuse a nickname. They reframed it. Think about it. Meghan and Harry's use of Lilibet came at the tail end of Megxit, a time when they were hammering the monarchy in the press, calling out family racism, and accusing the institution of silencing Meghan during her darkest moments. They said they wanted healing, but they delivered shockwaves. Then they used the Queen's private name, Lilibet, and insisted it was to honor her. Yet, curiously, they didn't seem to care that she never used the name publicly herself. No one else had dared to. It was sacred, intimate, untouchable, and suddenly, it was a global hashtag. Now fast forward to William and Kate. They waited. They said nothing for years. Then, after the Queen's death, when emotions were raw, but wounds were healing, they unveiled their Lilibet. But they didn't hold a press conference. They didn't sell a docuseries. They didn't turn it into a brand. They whispered it. And that is the royal way. So what you're seeing is a masterclass in contrast. Two daughters. Same name. One was an act of defiance. The other? A portrait of grace. Which do you think the Queen would have preferred? Chapter 3 of the Clapback. The middle name that wasn't random. Let's talk about Grace, because this might be the most savage part of all, if you know how to read it. On the surface, Grace is elegant, classic, sweet. But underneath, it's surgical. Remember, Meghan's narrative for years was built around emotional turmoil, struggle, a desire to be heard. Her war cry, on every platform, boiled down to one thing. They silenced me. She painted the royal family as cold, robotic, unfeeling. She accused them of ignoring her when she needed help, of choosing protocol over compassion. And yet, for all her outcry, there was something her critics always noticed. She was never graceful about it. She was angry, public, weaponized. So what did Kate do? She named her daughter Grace. A nod to poise, a nod to quiet strength, a nod to the kind of woman Queen Elizabeth was, and Meghan was not. Think that's accidental? Not a chance. Lilibet Grace doesn't just reclaim the Queen's nickname. It redefines what it means to carry that name with dignity. It says, this is how you do it. And Meghan?